Am I on here?
Yeah.
Lights on, okay.
All right. So, hey guys. This is the Oliver podcast. I'm here with my principal, Mr. Dan Euchre. We're gonna be talking about Metamorphoses, and then how the Bible, how the Bible interacts. No, not interact, but like, I guess, if it agrees or disagrees, and what the Bible has to say about Ovid's message. So, all right, let's get started. So hello.
How you doing, Bradley?
Good.
Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. I was just curious, what was your background with humanities and like reading all these ancient all this ancient literature?
Yeah, so I've been a reader my whole life, kind of book a day guy since I was in kindergarten, and always have loved literature in general. But my particular interest was science, and so that's what I specialized in undergrad. I was a biochemistry degree, but while I was studying biochemistry at Biola, I learned about the Torrey Honors Institute, and that's their great books, Oliver-like humanities program, also ostensibly modeled on the Oxford and Cambridge programs. For example, I don't think you use this language in Oliver, but the Oxford tradition, when you go to like your end of year assessment, where you kind of defend what you've written and discuss what you've learned, you don rags. They call it don rags because you kind of put on the rags of humility.
Oh,
and so we had don rags every year in Torrey, where they kind of looked at your annotations and discussed what you learned that year, and then every year you wrote a big thesis, like a 20-page research paper interacting with the various authors that you'd been studying that year.
I see.
But I loved it. So I went to John Mark Reynolds and said, look, I didn't know about this, but I'm doing the reading and talking to all your students anyway. Can I just be in the program? And he said, of course. And so
all right.
I had a good time with it. Yeah. So
I've heard, so we're going to be talking about Metamorphoses. He compiles a lot of Greek mythos into there, but he sort of takes those myths and bends them to his will to convey his message. What would you say? Like, do you remember the plot at all?
Yeah. So it has been quite a few years, like 20 since I've read it. And so I have general impressions, and I like Ovid. He's very different than, for example, like a Virgil or a Homer. Yeah. Of course, kind of coming in between the two. And he's definitely speaking in a very specific historical space, right? He's going to tell a story of, broadly speaking, if I remember right, it's from creation and the creation myths, and it's hard to nail him down on any particular like tradition. He's very eclectic. He brings together like everyone from like Empedocles. There's some Aristotelian physics, if I remember right, kind of explaining the why of things separating, like air from water, from earth, et cetera. That's very Aristotelian in some senses, but he's not really philosophically consistent. I don't want to say he's not a philosopher. I think he thinks deeply and profoundly, but I think he's more on the poetic and kind of social commentary side of things than like a philosopher. So as he begins with that creation myth and goes through, kind of this history up to the culminating point where there's this deification of Julius Caesar. Yeah. He tells these stories of the ages of heroes and all these myths that I think, and I believe the people he's talking to are used to hearing. And honestly, I think his authority is what is seen as common knowledge at the time. I don't think he's referencing the ancient pre-Socratics or Plato or Aristotle. I think he's just, to the extent that they've permeated his culture,
it's like if you told someone
is the extent to which he, exactly. Yeah. Like at least, especially in a more of a kind of like biblically based culture, you don't really need to give chapter and verse. You just, we all know the story of David and Goliath. Here's my take on it. Maybe David actually did have the advantage. But along the way, he does retell a lot of, I don't know, it's at least 200 different stories, right? Yeah, a lot of them.
It's a lot.
But the way he does it, whereas someone like Homer, like has this ideal of the hero,
Yeah.
and the hero on their kind of
Hero's journey.
their journey, and it's kind of like it's a little bit formulaic. You kind of it's a reinforcing ideals and the existing social dynamic and hierarchy.
Yeah.
Ovid's not doing that. He's much more subversive. He's emphasizing, I mean, it's in the title, Metamorphosis. All of these stories, somebody's changing form.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big metaphor for a few things. And one of those, I think, and probably why I think he got kicked out of Rome by Augustus, was because it was subversive. And he's saying, no, he's playing with it. It seems like he's coming across ironically when he's telling these things that I think a lot of people would take very seriously.
Yeah.
He's kind of, even like some of the structures he used in kind of giving like genealogies and things, he kind of like was very witty in how he did it. So I think he's ultimately doing many things, but he's having a good time.
Yeah.
He's showing off his like wit and his just like talents in a way that gets people to rethink traditional values and structures in society. Even things like, I don't know, you could say like women have been mistreated by the gods and in ways that are comparable to the way they were being mistreated in his present day.
Not just by the gods, but like I was thinking of Philomela.
Mm-hmm.
When I had to read that, I was like mortified the entire time.
Yeah, it's awful.
And I was like, whoa. But going back to that change, I think Ovid's trying to say that if there's change, there's something bad. So like for example, he sort of writes it as it starts off with the gods, then with man, and then the kingdoms, and it's just this never-ending spiral down into sin, and ultimately he's just trying to say change is bad, which Metamorphosis is basically change. But
so where do you think he gives it that value? He definitely thinks, I would agree, he says change is constant and inevitable. And I think, he starts with it's kind of creation from chaos. Yeah. Like order to some extent emerging, but the chaos never being eliminated. Yeah. Leading to change maybe. But where does he identify it as a negative thing or just like an inevitable
say because
thing?
I would say both. Change is inevitable, but also like in his last part. Hold up, I'm gonna quote it real quick.
That's what I like to see right here. Citation.
All right. He talks about at the end of his book how his work will never change. He says, yet I'll be born, the finer part of me, above the stars being compared a lot in his book to the gods, and with the apotheosis of Julius Caesar, basically, and Augustus, he's saying that I'm better. He's basically saying I'm better than you, and then he also says, immortal, my name shall never die. Wherever through the lands beneath her sway the might of Rome extends, my word shall be upon the lips of man. If true at all, is established by poetic prophecy, my fame shall live to all eternity. So, I think when Ovid's trying to say here, my word will never change and it will never die, and that's why it's perfect. Which, I would.
Do you think how seriously do you think his description or characterization of the apotheosis of Caesar is?
I think that I personally think that he wrote the apotheosis of Caesar to try to try to elevate Augustus as the reason why Julius Caesar is a god. Hold up, let me try to find. There's a quote, but it was like, oh, he was only he was supreme in war and peace through not his great campaigns triumphantly concluded, not his feats achieved at home, his glory gained so fast, made him star a comet new in heaven, rather his son. So
Augustus.
it would I believe that he was trying to elevate Augustus, because that was the guy at the time, and then the Caesar at the time, and I think he was trying to make a point here, saying that Augustus, you're not perfect. Like, look at all these stories about the gods.
I do
Look
think
how
so, yeah.
look how imperfect they are.
And to be a god is not to be perfect or without
exactly.
flaw. I think so too. I think for me, I would probably interpret it slightly more ironically.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think you touched on. But I probably would. He's like kind of deified, or kind of mythified the perfection of the gods. I don't know. They're different than our gods. I can leave that there. In that they are capricious and inconsistent, etc. Yeah. So this isn't like a new trope in Greek mythology or Roman mythology, but I do think he more than usual points out the problematic nature of them and what the implications are. Now, you're right. If Julius is joining that pantheon, through his apotheosis, doesn't mean he's perfect. And then along with that, of course, through Augustus, but he's trying not to get in too much trouble.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wonder, I think there's kind of just...
I think I've heard Mr. Hoops, my teacher, has said that a lot of scholars have tried to point towards the idea that Ovid was only writing this so that his butt would be saved. Yeah. Because he was on the verge of being exiled. Yeah. But I think under that notion, which there's even like deeper message, which he's trying to say, Augustus, you're not perfect. You're not the best human being. And I think that's what got him exiled.
I do too.
Yeah.
I think he tried to be a little too cute with it, or I think he said something, but I think it was clear enough that he meant it ironically or mockingly even. Yeah. That it caught up with him. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's probably right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I mean, we basically ran through like the first 3 questions, but I want to talk about this more because, from all the different authors that we've read so far, he takes all these stories, like he talks about the Iliad or the Odyssey, stories from there, and then he just twists them to make it his own story, which I personally really like. I've read about Greek mythology when I was younger, and and like just seeing how he like uses these stories, it's just so it's different. It's looking at it in a different view, and although some of the stories are like different, I haven't read them. It's like it makes sense why he would want to put it like that and why he made these changes to get his point through. So, what's your opinion on that?
I completely agree. Yeah, and I mean, I think you'd have to get into the weeds a little bit, but often it's to, some of the obvious things that emerge is he's trying to focus on or highlight or kind of get us to realize the fluid nature of identity.
Yeah.
And even I think even morality. I don't think he has like a really firm, coherent ethical framework that he lives in. I think he tells these stories that are pointing out that if you operate in a world in which the morality kind of flows from these gods who are themselves inconsistent and erratic and different in terms of how they act ethically, then here's the here's kind of the logical consequences of that. And it's kind of awful sometimes. Yeah. But he does it in a really kind of playful way too. That's fun to read. Yeah. So and you can see why he's inspired so many like subsequent people to make his stories their own. Yeah. Like even like Romeo and Juliet or like a lot of what's in Dante and stuff. Yeah.
All right. Now this is more towards the Oliver part. What would you say the Bible says about Ovid's idea of change?
Yeah, I think there's a distinction there. I think it's always interesting you read Epic of Gilgamesh,
Yeah.
right? Here, you see commonalities in kind of their creation story.
Yeah.
Like the separation of the elements, like earth from water, land from water, etc.
I heard
light from dark.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off,
It's
but
okay.
I was Mr. Hoops was talking about this, and apparently like he said that like Ovid was the first person to like try to make the elements and like put it into his creation story in Metamorphoses, and I was like, oh, because like in like a lot of like common like TV shows or like literature, that's what they use to start off. Like Avatar: The Last Airbender. That's basically what it starts off with: water, earth, fire, air, and Ovid. It was, I don't know. It's just interesting to me to have Ovid to start this, and I was like, oh, this. I would think that it would have came sooner, but like, I guess it's here, and yeah.
Right, and so I think what's clear in the Genesis account, is, there's one God and He did it. And so there's this direct contrast that's being highlighted between, different pantheon of gods and the Hebrew context.
Yeah.
But you kind of have your sun god and your you have analogs to those, and it's like, no, the sun isn't a god; it was created by God. All these things.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you see that, in Ovid. It's, of course.
Yeah.
So I think there's pretty crucial differences. But I mean, identity is a biblical sense of identity, especially, New Testament, is different. Our identity is in Christ, and there's something about us that once we make that decision is fixed. But who we are isn't, right?
Yeah.
We're not irredeemable. We can grow and evolve and be transformed, which I think is consistent with Ovid. So I think Christians would make a lot of the same critiques as Ovid does of the sociocultural system, structure, etc.
Yeah.
But maybe not end up where he does. Like
Yeah.
they would also say that's flawed, but here's what's not flawed. Whereas Ovid just kind of lets it sit there in all of its problematic, grittiness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just touch on that. I really see like Ovid's spiral down, and like when he's talking about like the gods, man, and like the kingdoms.
Yeah.
It's a lot like the Old Testament where it seems perfect in the beginning.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And then afterwards, it just once Eve eats the apple, then it's just spiraled down. It's like Ovid just like makes it's just the gods, man, everyone just tripping over again, and you see that in the Bible where you have Noah getting drunk, Abraham being in bed with what was her name? I'm blank. But
With Leah?
Huh?
With Rahab?
Oh yeah, with Rahab, and then having their son Ishmael, and then after that,
That's nice.
there's like King David sleeping with
With Bathsheba.
Oh, with Bathsheba,
Yeah.
and then it's just, and then like Israel growing into the sin, and then
It's not Rahab. It's bugging me, but we'll edit that out. It's not Rahab. But it is his servant.
Rahab is the person with the scarlet.
Yeah.
What was her name?
Abraham and I know Ishmael's mother.
Hagar.
Hagar, thank you.
Hagar.
It's bugging me. Yeah, it's almost an anagram. But
Yeah.
Rahab. But okay, got it correct.
All right. So yeah, Hagar, and then there was also and then just like Israel just falling into sin with all the idols, and then Judah falling as well. You see that a lot in Metamorphoses, and it seems like face to face. Like it seems not face to face. It seems like it's trying to tell the same story, but at the end, but like when we get to the New Testament, I think change happens for good. So God comes down as a human. That's a big change, and then dying and resurrecting, those are
Of
good.
course.
Those are
Yeah.
good changes, and
Yeah.
I feel like it contradicts what Ovid was trying to say, where being perfect means that being perfect means that you have no change, that you were
Being
perfect.
static, yeah.
I mean, I see that with like Jesus being perfect and all, but change was necessary for us to be redeemed. Yeah.
No, that's good. And there's a lot of things you touched on there. I think there's a lot of similarities between the way Ovid characterizes the Greek and Roman gods and the way in the stories of the Old Testament and the kings.
Yeah.
And the idols, and,
Yeah.
and just constantly failing after failing, failure after failure after failure. I do think that the most marked contrast in the metaphor in Christianity and in Ovid would be the metamorphosis that occurred, if you want to call the incarnation a type of metamorphosis. You know? Being careful not to be too heretical, but but God showed us what both Ovid and the Old Testament writers would agree upon is that humans constantly fail and fall short to the law, right, or to just being good. But Jesus didn't, and but even as a human, he could do that.
Yeah.
It's interesting, the idea of change, of goodness and perfection being connected to not changing. That's a very Platonic ideal, or even if you want to go earlier, Parmenides, in contrast to like Heraclides, which I think would, mesh more with Ovid, which is, you can never step in the same river twice. It's like this idea, everything that looks like it's one thing is really just a constantly fluid, changing thing.
Yeah.
And so you'd have some people, even like you have like Platonic theologians, like Augustine, as opposed to like a more Aristotelian Aquinas, arguing about this within the Christian theology, this idea of, so if God's perfect, how can he change? Because wouldn't any change be a departure from the ideal?
Yeah.
Well, maybe you're misunderstanding the nature of perfection. Like there could be a type of relational process that itself is perfect, even though it's constantly changing at the same time. And maybe that's part of like the mystery of the Trinity, etc. So I think there's some deeper theological questions. But in terms of contrasting and comparing with Ovid, I think that's right. Yeah.
So so what would you say about what's your opinion about Ovid's like message and his like last statement? Like, would you agree or disagree? I mean, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's like a unified single thesis to Ovid.
Yeah.
So I would agree with his critique of the mythologies that he inherited. I think his wittiness and playfulness and talent speak for itself, and I think he's contributed invaluably to Western literature.
Yeah.
I think we're all richer because of what he did. I think ultimately I disagree with his I don't want to say unthoughtful, but unquestioning sometimes. He's not trying to find the truth, or I don't think he's really trying to find right. I think he's playing with and in a fun, ironic way, making social critique and commentary.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to know, like I think that I can't just make a statement one way or the other that I agree with it. But I think overall he's worth reading, for sure, and helps you understand other things in the Tory program a lot better. It's like hard to imagine, reading the Aeneid without having read Ovid, or reading Dante.
Yeah.
Even Romeo and Juliet, like is it Pyramus and Thisbe, and like it's a very similar story.
Yeah.
That Shakespeare makes his own, and it's so fun to see that transformation from Ovid's version to Shakespeare's version.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't really make that, because I'm reading Romeo and Juliet right now. I was reading Romeo and Juliet, and I was reading it, but now when you pointed out that makes a lot of sense now. Shakespeare just, it's like what Ovid takes it and makes it his own. Shakespeare took Ovid's story and made it his own, and Romeo and Juliet is probably the most famous romance play.
Tragedy.
Tragedy.
Yeah, A Midsummer's Night Dream is a comedy, but it's also a retelling. I forgot exactly which I'll have to come back to me which Metamorphosis that was. But it's a story as old as time. Even as far back as Aristotle, he was claiming that there are certain there's only so many stories or forms stories can take, and we're all just doing different variations of like these archetype, patterns.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that's true to some extent, but the skill and the kind of historical location of the author makes it their own, and it's like in this never-ending creative process.
Yeah, it's like it's like poetics. Who wrote it again? Was it Aristotle?
He
Poetics.
Yeah.
I think it was Aristotle, but like he categorizes all of this, and it's like there's like there's like tragedies. There's not comedies. Tragedies, epics, and like I think when Ovid was writing this, he wasn't trying to fit into that per se, but like more like write a bunch of mini like stories, and it's like a collage where you.
I agree, and it resists like categorization.
Yeah,
it's like what genre is Metamorphoses?
Yeah, it's like it doesn't really have.
And I think that's just how it, and that's like the macrocosm, but there's like microcosms of that inside.
Yeah.
That where he is just eclectic in a lot of ways, just bringing in things from all sorts of places and resisting definition.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to say, do I disagree or not? Well, it depends on what we're asking. Which piece of it?
Oh, like
which mosaic?
Like for example, maybe I should touch on that. So like, would you agree that Ovid's work was more important than what like Augustus or Julius did? Like, would you agree with his last statement? What was it?
Yeah. I don't know. It's hard for me not to take him ironically there too.
Yeah.
I don't think you can I think it's apples and oranges. I think, what's your metric for gauging popularity or significance or impact? I thought you were asking because Julius Caesar wrote his the Gallic Wars. I think in terms of literature, he probably is more influential.
Yeah.
But in terms of their mark on history, it's hard to answer that. But I mean, I don't know. He's definitely as influential, I think.
Yeah.
To the extent that he lives on not just in his own writings, but in the influence he's had on others, like Shakespeare, et cetera, and Dante.
Oh. I'm not going to lie, I've ran out of questions.
Okay, that's good.
All right.
Right on time.
Yep. Yeah. I think that was good.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much for having me on the podcast.
Of course, it's my pleasure. Are there many of these? I'd love to see more episodes.
I've only... You
all do one?
No, I've only seen one other student do it.
It's an option?
Yeah, it's an option. It was either... It's either we do a paper or we try to think of a project, and if he approves, then it's good.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
All right.
All right, let's do it again next year.
All right. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.